Hello, my name is Katie Sotoday. Today is March 11th, 2015. I am here with Barzine Cerruti, and we're going to talk about the topic of elephant poaching in foreign countries. And Barzine Cerruti is a graduate from UCI, and he is very interested in the topic. He's actually taken a few courses on conservation of the animals. Is that correct?
Yeah, I took a few courses UCI in environmental conservation, animal conservation, as well as I'm a hunter myself, so part of that is animal conservation. Even though that sounds ironic, but the licenses that we pay go towards uh, animal conservation throughout the entire fish and wildlife department. So yeah.
Okay, that's great. All right. What do you know about elephant poaching?
Well, I know a few things. One, I know it's pretty much illegal in the majority of the world, um, and that I think about a few, 100 elephants die a day. I know it's pretty brutal. They're in it. Most of the poachers are in it just for the ivory, just retrieving the tusks, and they just leave the carcass there to rot. And also, there's some you know uh, social issues as well within the elephant family, because they'll leave the carcass to rot, and the calves of the elephant will basically be without parents, and they'll end up dying because they won't be able to survive on their own. So pretty barbaric. And I know it's obviously just for the sale of ivory. I know it's pretty big in Asian markets. So the poachers in Africa will then take the ivory, and I guess they will sell it to I don't know what you call them, jewelers or precious stone people in Asian markets, and then from there they'll make different jewelry and things out of ivory.
Okay, that's good. I was going to ask, is elephant poaching affecting other countries besides Africa? So, do you know what countries in Asia are
I
part
know
of it?
Chinese have a big market for ivory. They have a big black market for ivory.
Mm-hmm.
Thailand. Those are the two major ones I know of. I don't know about any other ones, but I'm sure it's not just Asia. I know that's probably the biggest market, but obviously there's a global market for ivory,
Mm-hmm.
and most of that I'm pretty sure is getting supplied by black market activities like going and poaching elephants in Africa.
So, you do think maybe they are forging ivory products to maybe America as well, something like that, maybe on
I'm sure some
airplanes.
of that, just like diamonds, I'm sure some of the ivory that gets illegally obtained in Africa, I'm sure ends up in American markets as well.
Yeah. All right. What do you think of ivory as a product?
I don't know. To tell you the truth, I don't own a single piece of ivory, anything. I don't think, unless there's some ivory in my watch or other things. But other than that, I don't really own any ivory, anything, jewelry or
Who,
anything like that.
yeah. Who do you think is causing elephant poaching the most? So you did say something about the Chinese, so you think mainly the Chinese? Do you think they're hiring African poachers to take them down, take down elephants?
Well, I mean, I don't think anyone's hiring. The way it would work is there's a demand for ivory, and by your run-of-the-mill Chinese or Thai consumer,
Mm-hmm.
people like you and I, we like our ivory, and so we'll buy it. And then the suppliers know there's a demand, so then they'll go and that demand will then create demand for poachers, right? They know they can
Mm-hmm.
sell this stuff. It's illegal, so they can get really good money on it, high premiums. So poachers then have an incentive now to go and hunt elephants and get their ivory, and then sell it to the suppliers, who then in Asian markets, who then in turn will sell it to their consumers who want different types of jewelry and other things made of ivory. Um, you also have it's obviously easy to get to, so that's another thing. I'm sure a lot of African nations, their parks, their public, what we call a park, which is basically a wildlife reserve, is considered a park there,
Mm-hmm.
which they are, they're supposed to regulate and monitor, and they do have rangers that also theoretically hunt the poachers. So a lot of these, in a lot of the parks there, the penalty for poaching is death. So they'll shoot you on sight if they find you, if they see you poaching. So it's kind of like a little war going on. But they obviously don't have the resources to fund their parks as much as we would have here in the United States or any other developed nation to fund our park rangers. So they can't monitor, and the land is so massive for the parks. It's not like a little park here in Tustin. It's going to be a massive piece of land with all kinds of wild animals. So they can get away with it. Obviously, and they're doing it. They can go poach, and sometimes they'll get caught. Sometimes they won't.
Mm-hmm. All right. Why do you think ivory contributes to our economy?
I mean, how?
Well,
people, it's something that people want. It's in demand. It's any type of jewelry. There's demand
why
for
do you
it.
think they want it?
Why do people want it? That's more of a philosophical question. Why do people want jewelry in gold? Because it's shiny and it's pretty and it's exclusive and it's precious, considered precious, and it looks nice. And I'm sure ivory is also, it's a big deal because it's rare. This is not something you can just buy. Like any jewelry, it's rare. You don't just buy it on, at your local Ralph's or your local Target, right?
Right.
So it has a certain premium to it. So for that reason, it's popular.
Yeah. All right. How do you feel when you see a business trying to sell ivory-made products?
I don't. As I said, I don't buy. I don't really own any ivory, so I don't think I've ever encountered a business other than one time in China, in the kind of bazaars, there were people selling ivory. At the time, I was young. I was a kid, so I don't really think much of it. I figured either they were farm-raised elephants, so it was legal, or they were. I didn't even think about the whole poaching scenario. I didn't consider that. At the time, I probably wasn't even aware that hunting elephants was illegal globally, and that they were being driven to endangered levels because of this type of hunting.
Mm-hmm.
So my opinion on it would have been nothing. Now, if I would see someone selling ivory, obviously I wouldn't think too highly of that institution or that establishment.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, I'm sure there's probably some legal ways to get ivory. Elephant farms, I'm sure not all of it is illegal. It's just the poaching element, poaching the wild ones are legal. I'm sure there's, like anything, there's like elephant farms where they raise elephants just to get the ivory. I might be wrong on that, I don't know.
All right. Do you think ivory is essential for the economies that you say demand it, to remain stable?
That's a good question. I don't know the data on how much GDP is created from the sale of ivory, so I wouldn't know, how dependent these economies are on the ivory industry.
Mm.
So unfortunately, don't know the answer to that. I can't imagine they're that dependent. I mean, it's just one. It's not, something like diamonds or gold or silver is a lot more valuable, but I wouldn't know.
Alrighty. Do you think they're killing too many elephants for this product?
From what I understand, for the most part, a lot of places they've been driven into endangered status. So, I would say they're definitely killing too many elephants.
All right. Are you afraid for the elephant population?
Yep, because you've seen with rhinos, they kill rhinos for the same purpose, just to get their what do you call it? What do you call that? Horn, I guess.
It's called. I guess you would call it a horn.
No, not a horn. I don't know.
It's a tusk, still kind of.
Is that considered a tusk?
I don't know.
Anyways, that is pretty valuable, and rhinos have been driven. I think they're still considered endangered species.
Yeah.
Rhinoceroses.
Mm-hmm.
Not. I think elephants are much less endangered than the rhinos, and I'm sure. I'm not even sure if elephants are really considered endangered. They are, right? Yeah.
Yeah, they're endangered.
Yeah, they're definitely endangered. Okay, so but anyways, so we've seen what happened with the rhinos, so we wouldn't want that to happen with elephants.
Right.
In summary.
Exactly. How do you feel when you see slaughtered elephants after poachers take their tusks for ivory? Have you seen any photos of elephant carcasses like after an elephant poacher is like taking care of them.
Yeah, it's pretty brutal.
Yeah.
You have first of all this sight of the tusk being removed. You're basically. I mean, they're connected to the elephant, so they have the nerve endings. They can feel it, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of the times, it's a quick thing, so they're not trying to do it in the most humane way possible, right? They're not taking their time. They're not trying to make sure the elephant's in minimal amount of pain. They're just gonna quickly try to either kill it. They're not gonna sedate it, right? They're just gonna try to kill it, get it down, and then rip those tusks off. The elephant probably is gonna still be alive in many scenarios where they're cutting the tusks off. So it's pretty brutal. It's like taking an arm or leg off of a human and just leaving them there to rot and die. And then, of course, after a few hours, thousands upon thousands of flies. So it's not a pretty sight.
Right. Okay. Do you think there will be any elephants left after you have your own children, or even after their generation?
There'll definitely be elephants left to an extent. They're not going to be extinct because you have, zoologists who keep them, to protect them. I'm sure there's that's the main thing. So you do have zoologists that try to protect elephants. Even the ones that are in these kind of commercial zoos where you can ride, etc., they still will be there. So there's definitely a group trying to protect them from going extinct. So they'll obviously they're not going to be able to get every one of them, but they'll probably get. I mean, you can't really do much. What can you do? Most of them are in Africa. I mean, there's something you could do about the ones in India and kind of in Southeast Asia. But the ones in Africa, I mean, a lot of the places are vast wilderness, vast savanna. They're parks that have limited resources, limited rangers protecting them. The governments are, for the most part, neglecting it because they're already pretty corrupt and they got a lot of other issues to deal with. So I'm sure there's not that much funding for the parks in Africa. You're talking about industrial development as well. In where is it? In I believe somewhere in Zambia. They're trying to run highways through some of these parks. So you're gonna have a lot of different industrial poultry, a lot of elements bringing the populations down. So they'll probably be driven to pretty serious endangered status, but obviously not completely extinct due to zoologists and of course the populations in Southeast Asia. I don't think they're as heavily poached. They're a little more protected than in the wilds of Africa.
Okay. All right. Do you think elephants are an important species that should remain in our ecosystem?
Yeah, well, I mean, any species is important. I don't think, if you completely eliminate a single species, it tends to have an effect on the entire chain of command. On some more than others, but elephants, I'm not too familiar with the kind of, I guess you would say, the ecology of the elephant community and what effect that has on other ecological systems. But due to their size, the nature of them, I'm sure they have a pretty wide impact since they are. So I'm sure they're pretty essential in the whole circle of life in any ecological system that they're in. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And also in some religions, like elephants are looked at as like very important. Like in India, their elephants are looked very highly upon.
Yeah, I mean, especially in India, they have a lot more uses there, used for transportation as well. I mean, they're obviously, kind of sacred animals. They have, from what I understand, they also have a high kind of emotional understanding. Something not to the level of like dolphins or whales, but I do believe they do have a kind of they're very social. They do have a kindred for their offspring, and they're pretty emotionally aware, more than most animals. So, I think that makes them pretty valuable in the animal kingdom.
Yeah, that's good. Is the government in Africa trying to enforce their laws against animal poaching?
From what it seems like, the rangers are very vested in it. A lot of the park rangers that are there to protect the parks, which are the reserves that are supposed to, protect all the wildlife, not just the elephants, but a lot of the wildlife on the parks. But obviously they're not as well funded as they should be. There's a lot of stuff going on. Even if the government does support them, there's a lot of social strife, civil war in many African nations. There's a famous park, I think, in Uganda called Virunga. So you have, let's say the government does support it, well, the government can collapse any day and time. There's a lot of civil war, rebellions going on. So if the government does collapse, a lot of these parks get involved in the civil war. So even, the rangers, let's say they're not getting funding from their own government, now they got to deal with, civil war and artillery shells going off in the middle of their parks. So there's not much they can do. I mean, they're very limited. We're not talking about an army here. We're talking about, probably for any park, I'm sure there's no more than 50 rangers protecting it, against thousands of different rebel factions and, the government itself, poachers itself. So amongst all this chaos, the poachers come, take advantage of that. So that's a big mess. And a lot of the African governments are, pretty corrupt. So I'm sure the least thing on their mind is the parks. They're probably more interested in exploiting the resources of their nation, of selling off assets to foreign companies, rather than protecting their wildlife. I'm sure that's probably the last thing on their list. Although the rangers, as I said, the rangers that are there, they're very invested in, but they're not getting the support they would need or the funding.
Okay. Should other governments try to step in and try to help prevent this endangered species from being extinct?
I mean, ideally, yeah, but through the proper channels. I don't think one government should unilaterally go in and try to save any of the animals that are on the brink of extinction, but definitely through the, there's a reason why we have the United Nations. They're there to, give an incentive to nations to work together to tackle issues like this. So, yeah, to the UN, there can be resolutions passed to, take action against this or offer peacekeeping troops or other supplies or funding, etc., anything needed to combat the poachers and the, further endangerment of any of these species in these African parks.
Okay. How would they be able to help the African government to enforce anti-poaching laws? The governments that would try to step in, do you think?
The laws are there. I just think that they don't have the reach. They don't have enough rangers, right? So that was one thing we said earlier. They, for a massive park, they have a certain number of rangers, which is obviously not enough because the poachers can continue to get away with it. So the international community would need to contribute more funding. And the funding would have to be, in order to avoid corruption and misuse, needs to be channeled directly to the parks, to the park system, to whatever administration in each country runs the parks, versus giving it to the government and then, different politicians here take it and misuse it, misallocate it. And then on top of funding, money is not the only thing. They got to give them tools, research, etc., the information needed to fight against these poachers, whether it's giving them more information on what technology exists that they can buy, from night vision to different radar systems to different laser sensor systems, anything that they can do to detect people moving in on the parks.
Yeah.
But yeah, obviously I think the main thing is giving them more money to get more personnel. They probably need more feet on the ground than anything out there.
Yeah, that's good. Should we also come into contact with countries that demand ivory to try to stop poaching?
You mean communicate with countries that have a big ivory industry? Yeah, you could, that's another thing. So as we said, the source of all this is the demand created by people like you and I that want ivory. And we don't necessarily know or understand or comprehend the process required to obtain ivory. I'm sure most of the people in these Asian markets that buy ivory, jewels, gems, etc., they probably don't know the brutality of how poaching works. They don't know that they're destroying these elephant families. They probably don't know that elephants are on the brink of extinction. So yeah, they can the best way to do it is to fund programs to educate them, right? Things like that.
Yeah.
More documentary filmmaking or direct programs, giving money directly to different governments to fund educational programs to let the people know what the costs of this are. So then if you can kill the demand from the people, regular people like you and I, then the suppliers, right, have less of a market, and in turn the poachers have less money to make, so it goes all the way back up. You kill the demand, you kill the supply, and then you eventually kill the need for poachers to go and kill elephants, because nobody's buying the ivory anyways. Nobody wants it. They're not going to kill elephants to get the ivory if nobody's buying it.
Right. So us emphasizing the importance of elephants and revealing the terror of poaching would lower the demand of ivory in the market. Is that correct? That's one of the questions, but.
Yeah, that's the main thing. You want to fight the demand more than the supply side. I think that would be probably the best approach, the most organic approach.
Yeah. All right. And so you do. So you think people would realize how serious the issue is after that? That's also another question.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, as I said, I'm sure most people that are buying ivory, they probably do not understand what is the scenario. Right. And there are plenty that are buying it because they just. They love jewels and they're very superficial, materialistic, and they just they want ivory and they want diamonds and gold and they don't care. But people are just buying little things of ivory, jewels, whatever. They're the ones I think that you can have an effect by educating them on the consequences of what they're doing.
All right. And final question: what do you ultimately think should be done to help the elephants and stop ivory trade after you have done this interview?
I think the main, two sides. On the supply side, the parks need more funding to fight against poachers, and on the demand side, there needs to be the governments of the nations that have big ivory industries. If they care, they need to do something to educate their citizens on the consequences and the brutality of the whole ivory supply chain.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Barazin. This was a great interview. I'll see you later.
Thanks, Katie.
Alrighty. Thank you so much again. And that's the end of the interview.